Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into something, well, pretty unique. It's a journey that takes us from mainstream sketch comedy all the way to Tibetan Buddhist cosmology.
Yeah, it's quite the mix. We're looking
Yeah.
at Charles Duncan Trussell.
Duncan Trussell. Actor, stand-up comic, but as you said, those labels, they don't really cut it, do they?
Not even close. I mean, his path in digital media, it's really something else. So our mission today, basically, is to sift through the sources and figure out how he went from, the usual comedy, route acting, writing, stand-up.
The grind.
Exactly, the grind. How do you go from that to being this major voice online, and also maybe the most surprising part, a real presence in spiritual conversations?
Right, and I think that's the puzzle we need to sort of piece together for you, the listener. How does one person's career realistically span writing for, like, Fuel TV's Stupid Face? Remember that?
Oh yeah, high-volume stuff.
High-volume sketches, yeah. And then roles in Curb Your Enthusiasm, but also become this burgeoning spiritual teacher, that's the term used, grounded in Tibetan Buddhism. That's a leap.
It really is. But the thing is, it's not just two separate tracks running side by side.
No.
No, it's like the way he blends them is the career. It's the product. You see it most clearly with his podcast, the Duncan Trussell Family Hour, the DTFH, and definitely with the Midnight Gospel on Netflix, which he co-created.
Ah, okay. The Midnight Gospel. We'll get to that.
Yeah, absolutely. But this whole deep dive, it really boils down to understanding how he managed to weave together comedy, some really complex stuff like Vajrayana metaphysics, and just effective communication, making it all accessible.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning then. Lay the groundwork. His early comedy career, because like you said, that discipline, that's kind of the bedrock, isn't it?
Totally. It funded and structured everything else later on.
Yeah.
So Charles Duncan Trussell, born April 20, 1974, Asheville, North Carolina. He's 51 now this year. And he started out focused squarely on the traditional path. Stand-up, writing, acting, even music.
He really did cover the bases.
He did. And that foundation, working in the trenches, it wasn't just about being funny. It was about learning the craft, the collaboration, the structure, especially in TV production. That whole toolkit was essential for what came later.
And you really see that commitment when you look at his early credits. It's dense. He wasn't just popping up occasionally. He was writing, contributing consistently. He knew the industry from the inside.
Absolutely. Like for Fuel TV's Stupid Face, he wrote and appeared in sketches for 2 whole seasons.
That's a lot of content.
It is. Think about the pressure new concepts week after week. That teaches you to think fast, find the joke, even in weird premises. And that's skill. You hear it all the time in the podcast, free-flowing style.
Okay, so that rapid-fire training then kind of paved the way for appearances on, let's say, more premium platforms. Showtime, Comedy Central.
Exactly. Showtime's La La Land, Comedy Central's Nick Swardson's Pretend Time. And he was in both seasons of HBO's Funny or Die Presents, which was pretty well regarded.
Right, and guest spots, too, placing him right in the thick of it. MAD-TV, that late-night sketch scene. And even Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Yeah, getting a Curd credit, that definitely gives you traditional comedy validation. It shows he was a working pro before he really leaned into the digital space.
But even back then, there were hints of something else, right? Trying to mix comedy with bigger ideas.
Yes. The sources mentioned this pilot he hosted for Comedy Central called Thunderbrain, a comedy science pilot.
Comedy science. Okay, that's interesting.
Isn't it? It suggests, like, way back, he was already interested in tackling complicated stuff, science, facts, and making it funny, making it accessible. It kind of foreshadows the whole DTFH approach, where you can jump from neuroscience to, I don't know, Bigfoot, to a stand-up bit.
And he wasn't just in front of the camera. He was working behind the scenes, too, consulting, writing.
That's right. He was a consultant and writer for Jason Sudeikis when he hosted the MTV Movie Awards back in 2011.
That's a big gig, shaping the voice for a major live show.
Definitely. So you add it all up, the sketch writing, the TV spots, the consulting, plus he was regularly touring as a stand-up, performing at big festivals like Just for Laughs in Montreal, Moon Tower in Austin.
So he really put in the work, mastered the traditional forms.
Exactly. And I think mastering that craft gave him the confidence, the structural know-how, and maybe the conversational flexibility to then break the mold later on.
Okay, so that feels like the perfect pivot point. He built this solid foundation, and then he took all that skill and poured it into the thing that really defines him now, the podcast.
Yes, Section 2. The Duncan Trussell Family Hour, the DTFH. This is the core, the ongoing heart of it all. And the scale is just huge.
How many episodes are we talking?
The source says over 600 as of September last year. Think about that volume. Hundreds and hundreds of hours of these deep, winding conversations.
Wow. And it wasn't his very first podcast venture, was it? He had something before that.
Correct. He dipped his toes in first by co-hosting the Lavender Hour with Natasha Leggero. She's a fellow comedian. They dated for a while, too.
Right, I remember that.
That ran until early 2012. So he got his reps in, figuring out the long-form audio thing before launching DTFH solo.
And the format of DTFH, it sounds simple on paper. Invite interesting people, talk for an hour.
Eclectic guests, open conversation. That's the description. But yeah, the magic isn't the format itself. It's the range, the sheer breadth of who he talks to.
Okay, let's talk about that guest list because it really tells the story, doesn't it? It's like a map of his brain almost. And it caters perfectly to that listener, like you, who wants diverse knowledge quickly.
Totally. It's like an intellectual hub. So you've got this core group of fellow travelers, comedians, podcasters. People like Joe Rogan, Dan Harmon, Joey Diaz, Bert Kreischer.
The usual suspects in a good way.
Yeah, Natasha Leggero, too, Jessa Reed. And then more intellectual types within that sphere, like Christopher Ryan, Danielle Bellali. Those conversations often feel very personal, funny, story-driven.
But then, and this is where it gets really distinctive, he deliberately pivots. He brings in serious, high-level, spiritual teachers, scientists.
This is the key differentiator. You might get a wild, hilarious Joey Diaz episode one week.
Raucous energy, yeah.
And the next week, it's this incredibly deep, quiet conversation with someone like Ram Dass.
Wow, Ram Dass. Especially getting him before he passed away, that lends serious weight to the spiritual side of the show.
Absolutely. And that pairing, the profane and the profound side by side, that's the entire appeal. You can go from earthly problems to cosmic truths in like one podcast feed.
Who else? You mentioned scientists.
Yeah. The cognitive neuroscientist, Amishi Jha, talking about mindfulness research. The visionary artist, Alex Gray. Rick Doblin from MAPS, talking psychedelics. Graham Hancock digging into ancient mysteries. Even political figures like Andrew Yang. And Dr. Drew pops up, too.
Okay, hold on. That range is staggering. To be able to talk meaningfully with Dr. Shah about neuroplasticity, then shift to Graham Hancock on, say, ancient civilizations, and then have Ram Dass on discussing service, Trussell has to be genuinely curious and, frankly, pretty smart to navigate all that.
He has to be. He's the bridge. He takes these complex, sometimes esoteric ideas and makes them feel relatable, accessible, often through humor, but always with respect.
So the DTFH becomes this kind of shortcut for people who are curious about everything.
Pretty much. It's like an intellectual sampler platter. It respects that desire for broad knowledge, but filters it through this very personal, honest, funny lens. It kind of democratizes access to big ideas.
And it's not just talking heads, right? There's music, too.
Yeah, the sources mention musical features like the band The Sundays. It just reinforces that open art, culture, science, spirituality, comedy.
Yeah.
It's all part of the conversation.
The full spectrum of being human, basically.
Exactly. Which naturally leads us right into the next section, because that spiritual dimension isn't just part of the show. It's kind of fundamental to its identity now.
Right. So beyond the comedian, the actor, the sources explicitly call him a burgeoning spiritual teacher, and they specify the tradition Tibetan Buddhism.
Yes, that's the specific framework he references and works within. But there's a really important nuance here, one he makes himself.
Which is?
He pushes back hard against being called a Buddhist comedian.
Okay. Why is that distinction important?
I think it signals that he doesn't see his spirituality as like a gimmick or just material for jokes. It's a genuine framework for his life, for understanding things. And that seriousness then comes through in the conversations, even when they're funny.
That makes sense. He's a comedian who happens to be Buddhist, not someone using Buddhism for comedy.
Okay.
But for listeners maybe not familiar with terms like Dharma or Vajrayana metaphysics, can you break those down a bit in this context? How do they show up in a podcast?
Sure. So Dharma, broadly, is the Buddha's teachings, the path, the truth. Vajrayana is a specific, quite advanced school within Tibetan Buddhism, sometimes called the Diamond Vehicle. It uses complex techniques, visualizations, and deals with really profound ideas about the nature of reality, like emptiness, illusion, non-duality. Big stuff.
Big stuff indeed. How does that translate into podcast chats?
Well, the sources say these teachings, the Dharma, aren't just discussed theoretically. They're brought up specifically for dealing with daily life and exceptionally difficult or rare circumstances.
Okay, so applying ancient wisdom to modern problems.
Exactly. Trussell and his guests might use these Vajrayana concepts like the idea that things aren't as solid as they seem, or that the self isn't fixed as tools to process stress or world events, or even personal grief and trauma.
And the humor connects to that.
Directly. The sources say that DTFH humor often draws on high-concept Vajrayana metaphysics, which sounds intense, but it means he trusts the audience. He can have a serious discussion about, say, reincarnation or tulkus, and then pivot to something totally absurd and hilarious. It's that mix again.
And he grounds it by referencing his influences.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. He connects the ideas to his mentors and key figures. We already mentioned Ram Dass. He also frequently references Chögyam Trungpa, who was a very influential, sometimes controversial, Tibetan teacher. It shows he's working within a specific lineage, not just making things up.
That grounding feels important. It's not just talk. There's a practical application, even community building, right? He leads meditation sessions.
He does. He hosts a weekly meditation and mindfulness discussions for his Patreon subscribers.
Okay, that's significant.
It really is, because he's taking these practices, which historically might have been kept more private, more within dedicated spiritual communities, and he's putting them right out there on a modern digital subscription platform.
It's like democratizing spiritual practice itself, using Patreon, blending the entertainer role with the, the guide or teacher role.
Precisely. And that whole commitment synthesizing deep talk and actual practice is what ultimately led to the most visually ambitious translation of his work, The Midnight Gospel.
Ah, yes, Section 4, the animated show.
No.
For anyone who only knew the podcast, this must have been something else. And the way it was made is key, right?
Undoubtedly key. It's the aha moment. The show wasn't written in a traditional sense. They took actual recorded conversations from DTFH episodes.
The podcast audio.
The podcast audio itself became the dialogue for the animation. The visuals, the story, the sci-fi chaos, all of that was created afterward, inspired by and laid over the existing conversations.
So you're watching this character, Clancy, voiced by Duncan, go through these wild psychedelic adventures on alien planets. But what he's saying might be from a real profound interview about death or love or reality.
Exactly that. It creates this incredible hybrid genre. The source calls it a high-concept postmodern sci-fi sitcom.
That sounds about right.
And the visual style is just as contradictory. You have this intense, often chaotic, colorful animation, high-stakes action. But the dialogue underneath can be incredibly calm, meditative, deep. That tension is Trussell's whole thing, isn't it? The wild comedy and the structured dharma.
And he didn't do this alone. Pendleton Ward was involved.
Co-directed by Pendleton Ward, yeah. The genius behind Adventure Time, which makes perfect sense. Ward has that visual imagination, that elasticity needed to match the intellectual twists and turns of Trussell's conversations.
And Trussell used the show to spotlight his own teachers, too.
He did. He brought his actual meditation teacher, David Nichtern, onto the show well. His voice and wisdom. And Nichtern himself was a student of Chögyam Trungpa. So that lineage is right there, embedded in this mainstream Netflix hit.
That's pretty amazing, bringing esoteric ideas right into pop culture like that. But he didn't completely leave traditional acting behind, did he? He still does voice work.
Nope, still active. He guest starred on that HBO animated show Animals, voiced a character named Dave. Described as the moth that experiments with neon for the first time.
Chuckles. That honestly sounds like something Clancy from The Midnight Gospel would encounter.
Doesn't it? And more recently, he's got a role in Fox's animated series Krapopolis. He plays Hippocampus, described as a physically incapacitated fish-like genius.
Okay. A fish-like genius fits the brand.
It seems to. So yeah, his unique voice, that blend of smarts and vulnerability, it's still in demand for conventional animation too.
Which brings us, I think, to a really crucial part of understanding him, the personal context. His own life story isn't separate from the work. It kind of fuels that openness, that vulnerability we see.
Completely foundational. Section 5, personal context and resilience.
Mm-hmm.
The reason DTFH and the Midnight Gospel feels so authentic is because he practices what he preaches about honesty, even when it's incredibly difficult.
And the biggest example of that has to be his health crisis.
Without a doubt. December 14th, 2012. He goes on his own podcast, DTFH, and announces in an episode titled, just unbelievably bluntly, oh, high ball cancer, that he's been diagnosed with testicular cancer.
Wow, just puts it right out there.
Puts it right out there. No press release, no stepping away. Uses his own platform in real time to talk about this terrifying, life-changing thing. It goes back to what the sources said about applying Dharma in exceptionally difficult circumstances. He turned his crisis into a public lesson.
And thankfully, it turned out okay.
Yes, the treatment was successful. He gave an update just a couple of weeks later, December 28th, confirming he was okay. But that whole sequence, the raw honesty, the quick follow-up, it cemented this idea that the podcast wasn't just talk. It was a space for processing the real, messy, scary parts of life, using these philosophical tools he explores.
It must have changed the relationship with his audience, made it much deeper.
Had to. It proved the open conversation thing wasn't just a tagline. It became about shared vulnerability, maybe even collective processing.
And on the personal front, we know a bit about his family, too. He has a brother, and his mother passed away.
Yes, a brother named Jeff. And his mother, Deneen Fendig, died in 2013. She comes up quite a bit in his work, actually. Seems like she was a big influence, both emotionally and comedically.
His relationships have sometimes overlapped with his work, too, right? Natasha Leggero?
Yeah, dated Mary Lynn Rajskub, another comedian, and Natasha Leggero, who co-hosted The Lavender Hour with him. He was also linked with Cor Keegan, a model.
But his current life seems more settled. Married, kids.
It does. Married Erin Trussell in 2018. And true to form, he announced he was going to be a father not in some magazine, but on Joe Rogan's podcast in June 2018.
Keeping it in the family, the podcast family.
Pretty much. And now, the sources confirm they have 3 kids, 2 sons and a daughter. So this whole arc, cancer, loss, marriage, fatherhood, it's all been part of the public narrative, shared openly. It underscores how the work and the life are just completely intertwined from.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up. Bring it all together. We've really traced 3 distinct yet connected pillars of his career.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Pillar 1, the skilled mainstream comedy pro. The actor, writer, stand-up who did the hard yards, TV shows like MAD-TV, touring, festivals. That foundational discipline.
Pillar 2, the influential podcaster. DTFH. Over 600 episodes defining this unique space where comedians, scientists, spiritual teachers all get treated with the same depth and curiosity. That eclectic range.
And Pillar 3, the spiritual guide or maybe teacher in progress, rooted in Tibetan Buddhism, actively teaching mindfulness, applying Dharma publicly through his platform.
And the real innovation, the synthesis, is how these pillars connect in the content. DTFH became the lab where high-concept metaphysics met comedy. And then, incredibly, that philosophical audio became the actual script for the Midnight Gospel.
Proving that deep conversation can be the narrative engine for compelling, even popular visual storytelling.
It wasn't about choosing philosophy or jokes. It was about making them inseparable.
Exactly. The spiritual insight and the weird animated gag, they're not opposed. In his work, they're basically 2 sides of the same coin. He dissolved the boundary.
Which leaves us with a final thought, something for you, the listener, to chew on. If these really deep, personal, philosophical conversations, the kind that used to happen behind closed doors, maybe if they can be lifted word for word and become the dialogue for a hit animated sci-fi show, what does that actually signal about where storytelling is headed?
Yeah, and maybe.
Yeah.
But what does it say about the role of the comedian? Is someone like Trussell, who combines that radical honesty with intellectual curiosity, becoming a new kind of philosophical guide for the modern age, maybe stepping into roles previously held by academics or clergy?
It really feels like that line between entertainment and genuine philosophical exploration. It's not just blurry anymore. In Duncan Trussell's world, it feels like it's been completely erased.
Something to definitely ponder.
Indeed. We'll leave it there for this deep dive.